I worked the same job for 12 years, and I always parked in the same spot. Everyone knew it was mine. One morning, I show up at 4 a.m., and there's a black Cadillac parked there, tinted windows. I'm annoyed, but I figure maybe it's a new employee. Except, the car doesn't leave. It's there during my whole shift. Still there when I clock out. The next day, still sitting in my spot. And something about it bothered me. The smell in the air, the heat hit, just felt wrong. My dad was a Marine and a cop, and he always told me, if something feels off, it probably is. So, I called the non-emergency police line. I felt stupid waiting over an hour for them, all over a car in my spot. But when they finally ran the plates, everything changed. That car was tied to an Amber Alert, the last sighting of a missing 15-year-old girl. When they opened the trunk, they found her. I never learned her exact time of death, and sometimes I wonder if she could have been saved had I called sooner. That thought haunts me. But one thing I know for sure, if your gut tells you something's wrong, don't ignore it. You never know who you might save.
I was 22, living alone, and working as a therapy assistant. Since I'm a full-time wheelchair user, I depended on cabs to get to work. Most of the drivers were decent guys, but there was one I never trusted. He'd made comments before, even asked me out. I always said no. One morning, he showed up late. As I transferred into the car, I felt him way too close. His hand brushed over my back and bottom. I snapped at him, but he only smirked. 10 minutes later, I realized we weren't going the usual way. When I asked, he ignored me, then said coldly, "I could take you to my flat. My 3 mates are there. There's nothing you could do." Inside, I froze, but I forced myself to sound calm. "If I'm late, work will call. They know your firm and your name." His smile dropped. After a long silence, he finally turned back to the right road. When I got to work, my boss called the police. That driver vanished, and I never saw him again.
I used to sleepwalk when I was a child. We lived in a rough neighborhood, Decatur, Gar, and I would wake up outside in the middle of the night, not knowing how I got there, and would have to walk home and walk into the darkened doorway I had left wide open for whoever might be lurking around. However, the time that scared me the most was when I was about 9 years old. I woke up and found myself with the bedroom curtains drawn back and staring out the window. As the first came awake, I noticed a very large and completely hairless man, no hair, eyebrows, etc., staring at me, and slowly inching closer to the window and closer to my face. He was looking bewildered, like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. At that moment, I realized what was going on, and I started screaming, uncontrollably, frozen in place, and peeing down my leg. The man freaked out and screamed, did a tumbling move, and then ran off in a weird zigzag, like he was trying to dodge bullets. My mum woke up and thought I probably had a nightmare. The next morning, we found a screwdriver on the front porch and damage to the door jamb and door handle. Master used to say, "That dog isn't worth $2. That's how Buck got his name. Not the name his mother gave him. But Buck always came when Master called. Because Buck is a good boy. Buck remembers his brothers and sisters. Then Master took him. Buck bit his hand the first night. Master hit him so hard he tasted blood. Buck never bit again. Because Buck is a good boy. When Lady came, life got better. She was kind. She gave Buck treats. But sometimes, Master hit Lady too. One day, he hit her so hard her teeth came out. She left, promising to return. Buck wanted to follow, but he stayed. Because Buck is a good boy. After that, Master drank, fought, disappeared. Police came, even took him away. But Buck always waited. When Master returned, Buck licked his hand. Master kicked him, so Buck learned not to bother. Because Buck is a good boy. One night, Lady came back with men in black clothes. They broke into the house. Buck heard Master screaming, smelled blood. Buck thought about helping. But Buck remembered. Don't bark, don't bite, don't bother Master. Lady held Buck close and took him away. He rested his head on her knee and stayed quiet until the screaming stopped. Because Buck is a good boy.
This isn't exactly a story, but rather a real live event that occurred to a poor American kid, Harley Baldwin. He was abused as a kid and kept running away, sleeping in abandoned buildings, and this one time he ran away. He didn't come back. His parents went to the police, but they found nothing. Fast forward a month later, and their next-door neighbors came back from their holiday trip as their house was being renovated, saying they had footage of him going into the house. No signs of a break-in, but the officers checked it out anyways. Nothing in the house but a metal plate and a jacket, Harley's jacket. One of the officers then worked out the disc was a vent, so he put his hand in the vent and found Harley's dead corpse in the chimney. Vent, as he had thought it was just a straight way to get into the house. It wasn't though, as the vent got narrower towards the bottom. He got stuck. Thinking it was his jacket, he put it into a vent and punched it out into the vent and slid a bit further down. Breathing in and putting his hands down slid him down a bit further. But then he realized he wasn't going anywhere. He couldn't breathe or get out as it was a smooth surface either. And thus he passed away alone, likely cold too, inside of a chimney. Scary when you think about what was going through his head while he was slowly suffocating in silence.
In the town I grew up in, there was a really old two-story, abandoned house. All the kids called it the Devil Worshipper House. A huge tree had grown right in front of the front door, so you had to climb in through the windows. I can't remember why the back door was unusable. One time, when I was about 10, my older brother dared me to go in it with him. I walked up to the house, but had the most frightening feeling, so I refused to go in. Later, my brother told me about a time he and his buddy went inside, and he still swears this happened, even 30 years later. My brother and his buddy went inside the house. There was graffiti, empty alcohol bottles, and a burnt cat. The buddy ran up to the second floor and saw a large cross wrapped in toilet paper. So he beckoned for my brother to come upstairs. The stairs had a landing halfway up before they continued up in the opposite direction. My brother said he started running up the stairs and went up at least 6 flights of stairs, but could never reach the top second floor. He went down one single step and was suddenly at the very bottom. This freaked him out, so he ran out of the house as fast as he could.
My mom remarried a couple of years ago after being widowed for over a decade. It all happened really fast, just 3 months of dating before the wedding. She moved into her new husband's isolated house in rural Virginia, surrounded by rolling hills and empty fields. When I first visited with my fiancé, everything looked beautiful, but I couldn't shake this heavy, oppressive feeling. Her husband was perfectly nice, but something in that house felt wrong. The uneasiness was worse indoors, so we stayed outside most of the day. That night, while showering, my fiancé suddenly stopped and asked, "What happened to your back?" I had no idea what he meant until I saw it, a huge hand-shaped bruise across my skin. No one had touched me. That night, I couldn't sleep unless we covered the window because I was sure someone was watching from the pitch-black field outside. The next morning, I completely broke down. I couldn't stop crying and begged to leave early. The second we got in the car, the pressure lifted, like I could finally breathe again. I tried to laugh it off until my fiancé whispered, "That bruise. It looked like someone's hand pressed into your back." Weeks later, my mom came to visit me. When I finally told her about the strange feelings in the house, her face went pale. She admitted she felt the same way and then told me the truth. Her new husband's previous wife had died right outside that same window, in the empty field.
My family has lived in rural Nebraska since they immigrated from Germany in the mid-1800s. Near the turn of the century, disease was pretty rampant in the homesteading area, and it killed off members of almost every family. When someone died from illness, time was of the essence in burying them, as not to let the virus spread from the deceased to the living. This meant no wake periods. So, an aunt of some unknown number of greats, preceding her relationship to me, passes away of some disease, and she gets buried in the family cemetery on the homestead. The dogs were very fond of her, so it wasn't too surprising that after the funeral, the 2 dogs stuck near the grave. The rest of the family began to think something of it, when, a week and a half later, the dogs were still visiting her grave, almost constantly. But they weren't just at the grave. They were visibly distressed, frantic, and often barking while dead. This goes on for maybe 2 weeks, when the family decides to check it out. They dig the casket up and open it. The deceased's hair has all been pulled out. Her fingers are raw and bloody and mangled from wear. On the inside of the casket door, they can see deep scratches in the wood. She was comatose when they buried her, and she came to while underground, spending probably her last 5 or so days alive in a buried casket. When I was a kid, I had an imaginary friend named Jesse. I don't really remember much about him, but I remember my parents asking about him quite a lot and seeming quite concerned. Anyway, a couple of years ago, while visiting relatives in Ireland, we were all exchanging ghost stories when my mum brought up Jesse, so I was obviously quite confused because I thought he was just an imaginary friend. Well, my mum started off by saying how she didn't understand why I called him Jesse, as I'd never heard that name before, and she didn't know anyone who was called that, which I didn't think was too weird. It's just a name, right? Then she said that one time when my dad was on his way to work, he was an electrician in a mine at the time. I asked him to bring back coal for Jesse's gran. I was about 2 or 3 at the time, and wouldn't have understood what a mine was if I even knew he worked in one. Then the end of her story was when we were on a day trip to a place we visited a lot when I was really young, and I suddenly just ran off, and they followed me into a graveyard. I ran straight to a small grave and stopped and just stared at it. It was Jesse's grave. I felt quite creeped out that I spent a lot of time as a child playing with a ghost.
Rose's husband barely looked at her anymore. Every day was the same. He'd come home, crack open a beer, and retreat upstairs, leaving her alone in silence. The only thing he seemed to care about was dinner, so Rose made it perfect. Garlic potatoes, roasted cauliflower, and his favorite, meatloaf. Her own recipe. When he finally sat down, his eyes stayed glued to his phone. Not a word, just chewing, just silence. But Rose didn't mind. Tonight, she had a surprise. Halfway through the meal, she asked, "So, how's the meatloaf?" "Good," he muttered, barely looking up. That's when it happened. His fork froze. He'd bitten down on something hard. Slowly, he pulled it from his mouth. It was a silver Billy button ring. His eyes widened in horror. He knew exactly whose it was, his mistress's. Rose smiled sweetly. "There are leftovers in the freezer if you're still hungry." His hands shook, the color draining from his face. For the first time in months, he finally looked at her, and that's when Rose leaned closer. She was pregnant.